today what we're going to do is we're going to combine the trombone and French horn videos, because a lot of the stuff we're covering today is about rhythm and tonguing. And for those two instruments, it's exactly the same principle. So instead of having to re-explain the same thing twice, we're just going to merge it into one. And when we do our practice lessons, we're going to play it on each instrument. So if you're a trombone player and we're working on the French horn part, just follow along in the music and play along if you can. If you're a French horn player working on the trombone part, just play along on the French horn, and you'll get double the practice either way, okay? So today we're going to be covering lessons 2, 4, and 6 in your binder. And the reason we kind of skipped around was 1, 3, and 5 is some notes that you need to do 2, 4, and 6 and enable you to learn how to tongue after you learn how to make the note, right? So today we're going to be focusing on counting our rhythms when we read a new piece of music, learning our note names on the staff. If you haven't gotten a good hold of that when we did our theory lessons, this is some good practice. And then we're going to learn how to play a whole piece. So we're going to learn what a beginning of a piece looks like, what the end of a piece, how do we know when to stop. And then by the end, we'll be right before Mary Had a Little Lamb in lesson 7. And we'll cover that whenever we make the next video, all right? So what I'm going to do is we're going to cut the video and we're going to do a close-up of the music, and we're going to learn how to count along and read note names. Okay, so everyone get your band binders out and go to lesson 2, Feel the Beat. So, on all of these lessons, you should already have practiced how to play each of these notes. So in lesson 2, you see the only note we play is D on the treble clef, and on the bass clef, the only note we play is D. If you get confused, remember how to count from the bottom line up for each staff, and that's usually good enough. What I learned is the phrase green eggs. So G is the bottom line of the bass clef, and you just count up, and E is the bottom line of the treble clef. So green eggs, right here. So on bass clef we have G going up the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D. So this line is D. And then on the treble clef, if this is green egg, so the bottom line is E, we have to go down, so we're going to go backwards in the musical alphabet, E, D. So this bottom space below the staff is D. Okay? Now, one thing that we haven't really learned is how to count. So every note is assigned a note name based on where it is in the staff, and it's also assigned a length on how long you're supposed to play it. So if you remember from our theory lessons at the church, these are called quarter notes, and you can tell they're quarter notes because they have a stem and the note head is filled in black. Okay? That means it gets one beat. If it was a note with a stem and a white head, it would be a half note and it would get 2 beats, right? So today we're just dealing with quarter notes. And how we count it is the first beat is assigned to the number 1. The second beat gets a 2, and so on and so forth. And then when the measure ends, we start over at 1. So there's 4 beats in this measure. So we would count it 1, 2, 3, 4. Now these are called quarter rests, if you remember, and they also get 1 beat. So we would count that 1, 2, 3, 4. But just in real music, whenever there's a rest, you don't play. So when we count music, we also don't count the rests. We just count them in our head. So if I was to count this, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how I would count this lesson. Now, what I want you to do is go back, turn on a metronome, and set it to a slow beat between 60 and 80 beats per minute, whatever feels comfortable to you, and practice counting this. 1, 2, 3, 4. and so on and so forth. And make sure whenever you get to a rest that you don't count out loud, just count in your head. Okay? Now that's how you count music. When you have eighth notes and half notes and things like that, you count them differently. But we're at quarter notes right now, so we just count the beats. Okay? Now, when we do our note names, it's just like counting the music, but instead of numbers, we say the note letters or the note names. So to count this song, we would say D, 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 D. Now I know that seems pretty simple right now because the notes aren't changing, but practicing with something simple and getting more complicated as you go is the best way to learn, okay? So now, let's get our horns out and we're going to try and play this. Okay, so now that we've counted and we've done the note names for lesson 2, what we're going to do is we have to learn how to tongue. Now, we learned how to play notes just by bringing the mouthpiece up and blowing. But what we do to make the notes clean and separate from each other is we tongue the beginning of each new note. Okay? So what that means is we take our tongue, like the word says, and we hit it against the back of your top teeth to separate the air coming through your horn. Okay? Now what you do, this is going to get a little bit technical, is you take the very tip 3 taste buds. If you can imagine, there's 3 little taste buds on the top of your tongue. Right there. You take those 3 taste buds and you hit them against the back of your front teeth. Kind of not right at the bottom of your front teeth. Not right here. But kind of up here. Where the fleshy part of the roof of your mouth meets your teeth. Somewhere in there, you should put those 3 taste buds, like when you pronounce the sound T, like t, 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 like that. You should get even fewer taste buds, because when you make the T sound, you kind of use a lot of your tongue. What you want to do is make a really pointy T sound, like t. I know it probably doesn't sound very much different on camera, but you should practice using just the very tip of your tongue. And that's where you should hit it every time. Okay? So now that we're ready to do lesson 2, I'm going to turn a metronome on. And I'm going to play it once on each instrument. And if I'm not playing your instrument, you should still play along. Okay? So, I'm going to turn on the metronome to 82 beats per minute. And I'm going to start playing on the French horn. And I'll play it on the trombone. Okay? I'm going to count in. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to breathe, and you should breathe with me. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, play. Okay? So if I don't say 1, 2, 3, 4, don't get thrown off, because everyone's got to breathe when they play. Real full breaths like we talked about. Okay? So, just a reminder, on the French horn, don't take your tuning slide out because that's important, like I just did. If you play a B flat horn, you're going to play first and second valve only. And if you play an F horn, it's just the first valve. Okay? Now, I'm going to turn the metronome on, and we're going to play lesson 2. Here we go. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, so be honest with yourself, and if you think you did pretty good, you can go on to lesson 4. Now, trombone players, stick around. We're going to do it again. Okay? Now remember, D is in 4th position. 4th position. Ready? And 1, 2, 3. Okay. And that is lesson 2. Okay, now moving on to lesson 4, double trouble. Now, just like in lesson 2, we're going to count and we're going to do note names, okay? Now, the only difference between this and lesson 2 is we have one extra beat in each little group of notes, and we also have a different note. So, the challenge now is we have to be able to read the note names as we go, okay? So in church music, it's usually not this simple, and we have to learn how to practice reading notes as we go until you have the music memorized and you've played it a lot. But in the beginner band, this is a critical skill to develop whenever you see a new piece of music and it's time to play it in the church. If you've practiced reading your note names, then you should be able to play any piece of music that the band director pulls out and sets the band to play. Okay? So whenever you practice at home, like you should be 30 minutes every day, you should not just practice playing, but you should practice reading music. So go through your lessons, and if you want to skip ahead, don't really skip ahead too far, but if you want to learn to read some new notes, that's fine. And read C, C, D, D, C. And then if you feel comfortable with that, go ahead and flip forward in your binder a few pages and read the different notes and see how complicated it gets and make yourself comfortable with that, okay? But for this video, we're going to practice counting and note names for lesson 2, 4, and 6. And right now we're going to do 4, okay? So, first, we always start off with counting because counting is simpler. And you notice quarter notes get one beat, just like in the last lesson, okay? So let's see how well we can do and count along with me, okay? And 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, rest, rest, rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, rest, rest, rest. Now you noticed I was saying rest during the rest. I said it kind of quietly to myself because when we're counting, we really shouldn't say anything because a rest means be silent. But if you have to say rest quietly to yourself so you can keep track of where you are, that's totally fine, okay? So now we've done counting, and you remember when we cross a measure, the beats start over. So once we get across this measure line, the beats start over at 1 again. Don't forget that. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay? So now let's do note names. And I'm not going to tell you what these note names are. Remember from the last video, you should remember what these are. And we're just going to practice reading, okay? And 1, 2, ready, and C, C, D, D, C. D, D, C, C, D. Okay? Now, it's very convenient. If you're a French horn player, you should be reading the treble clef, and the bass clef is for the trombones. But for right now, those are the same notes. Okay? So, and I'm pointing here and I say C, it means the same thing here. Okay? And I'll let you know if it's different if you don't catch it on your own. All right, so now let's get our horns back out and let's play lesson 4 together. Okay, so now that we've counted lesson 4, we've done the note names, we're ready to play. Now remember in lesson 2, we talked about tonguing. This still applies here. Every time you play your horn, you have to practice good tonguing practicing. I know that sounds kind of funny, good tonguing practicing practice. But that's what you have to do. Okay, so lesson 4, double treble. It's very similar to lesson 2. We've just added a quarter note. And now we're playing C and D. So just another reminder for the French horn players, C, we don't press any buttons. If you play an F horn, you still don't press any buttons, okay? Both kinds of French horns, it's open. It's what we call open. Trombone players, it's a little bit more of a challenge. You have to go all the way out to 6th position. Okay, for a lot of people, that's just stick your arms straight out. And if it sounds kind of wonky compared to how I do it, kind of feel around until it sounds the same, okay? So if you're worried about finding 6th position, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And I'll show you up here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So, now let's play lesson 4. And I'm going to count you in the same way. I slowed the metronome down a little bit since this is a little bit harder. Okay? And I'm going to start on the trombone this time. Okay. And 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, right away, you may notice the hard thing about playing the trombone is switching really fast. So what you have to think in your head is, what note are you about to change to and where is it at? So for this lesson, we're going between 6th position and 4th position. So you've got to really have that in your muscle memory where they are. So when it's time to change, you don't get confused, okay? Now let's do lesson 4 on the French horn. I'll slow the metronome down a little bit, just like last time, so you can get used to changing notes. And I'm going to count to 2, and since you need a little bit more time to set your face in the small mouthpiece, I'm going to count to 2, and then breathe for 2 beats instead of 1, okay? So don't get thrown off if I just count to 2 and leave you out for yourself. The metronome's still going, so just remember 1, 2, 3, breathe, play, okay? For me, I'm going to take 2 beats. I'm going to go 1, 2, breathe, set, play. Okay? Here we go. Lesson 4. And 1, 2. Okay, so if you did it, congratulations. If you didn't, no shame. Go back and just practice it again, okay? And we'll move on to lesson 6. Now, lesson 6, moving on up. Now we have 3 different notes that we're going to play, and they're all the same 3 notes that we learned in the last video. Now, if you're having trouble playing all 3 notes on the honor system, you should go back to the last video and learn how to finger them and how to play them. If you remember, for brass players, we should really be practicing on our mouthpieces. So these 3 notes, if you're having trouble, go back, take your mouthpiece off your horn, and find a note to match. Don't just try and play it in your head. Find a piano or an app or something on the computer where you can play the note out loud and you can match it on your mouthpiece, okay? Now, when we do this piece, you notice we don't have the numbers in the middle anymore to help us out. By this point, we've practiced lesson 2 and 4, and the rhythm isn't that different, and the note names are just a little bit different. So we should be able to count and do the note names for lesson 6 fairly easily, okay? And if you can't, that's nothing wrong. You just need to go back and practice and get the hang of the note names, okay? Now, remember, when we count, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and we don't say 5, we say 1. Okay? That's a really common mistake I used to make all the time when I would count music, is I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'd catch myself. And then I'd get lost, and then I'd have to wait for the next measure to start on 1 again. Okay? So don't be like me, and remember, your measure lines mean you start over at 1. All right? So let's count this together. Just our numbers. Ready? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so if you had trouble with that, there's nothing wrong with you. Just you need to go back to the other lessons and practice with the numbers still on the page. When you feel comfortable, flip over to lesson 6 and start practicing where the numbers aren't on the page, okay? It's all about practicing. Practice, practice, practice. All right, so now let's do the note names. And remember, trombones are going to be down here, and French horns are going to be up here. Okay, but the notes for now are the same. All right, and the way I counted in was a little bit different, but I'm just trying to expose y'all to different ways you may hear in the band. Sometimes you may hear ready, go. You just may hear 1, 2, 3, 4, or sometimes you just hear and play. But they all mean the same thing. And whenever you are getting counted in the big band at the church, the band director is going to count to whatever number comes right before you start playing. So here we start playing on beat 1. So in the church, the band director is going to count to the beat before 1. And it's not 0. Remember in music, so let's look at this measure. If this is beat 1, the beat before beat 1 is beat 4. So in the big band, if we play this, the band director would count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd start playing on 1. Or they may say 1, 2, ready, play, 1. I hope that makes sense. And so when I count during our practices, I'll count these different ways so we get used to it, all right? So let's do our note names now. And 1, 2, ready, and B flat, 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 C, C, D. Okay, so that's how we read moving on up. All right, so one more time this video, let's get our horns out. Okay, so if you've gotten past playing lesson 4 and lesson 2, then now we're going to play lesson 6, moving on up. The same rhythm as lesson 4, just different notes, okay? So, just like last time, we're going to play it on both instruments. And we'll do it on the horn last time. Yeah, so now we're going to do it on the horn, and then I'll do it on the trombone. But I expect all of you to play it both times, no matter what instrument you play. Okay, so let's get our metronome. Here we go, lesson 6. Oh, I almost forgot. Just a reminder, the B flat fingering for French horns is first valve. No matter what French horn you play, it's first valve. Okay, now we're ready. And 1, 2. Okay. Now, let's do it again on the trombone. Just a reminder, B flat is in first position. All the way in. Okay. Let's do it again. And 1, 2. Okay. So, if you've gotten those 3 lessons down, that's awesome. Go back and practice them and really work on your tonguing, okay? So work on getting your notes very distinct where they don't get confused with one another, okay? So whenever you play lesson 2, it should sound like 4 individual notes and then rest, and then 4 individual notes. It shouldn't sound like 1, 2, 3, 4. It should sound like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So on top of getting your notes worked out where they're nice and steady, now add on top getting your notes very clean and separated. Okay? And then we'll see you on the next video when we do lesson 7.